So we'll begin with reciting some prayers to help our minds be in a good state, positive state for what we're doing. And then I thought to lead a short meditation on what we were talking about recently. So we start by taking refuge, putting ourselves under the Buddha's compassionate care and guidance in the way we live our life and the direction we go into, and generate bodhicitta, the aspiration to become a Buddha ourselves, to be able to help all other beings. And then the prayer of the four immeasurable thoughts sort of expands that concern for others into compassion, love, joy, and equanimity. Try to generate those thoughts, those attitudes in your mind. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. The seven-limb prayer is to clear away our negative karma, negative energy, and accumulate positive energy to help our minds develop along the path. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. And then the mandala offering involves offering the universe, all the beautiful, pleasing, precious things existing everywhere, imagining it as a pure land, offering it to the Buddha, and then wishing all living beings to experience the Pure Land. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this Pure Land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami. And let's recite the mantra of the Buddha 3 times and imagine the Buddha sending light, all his excellent qualities, his realizations in the form of light flowing into you, filling your body and mind and helping your mind transform, become free of negative thoughts, attitudes, and be able to have more positive, beneficial thoughts and attitudes. Taya Mahamanaye So. Okay, so just take a few moments to settle down and make sure you're sitting in a comfortable position, but also try and keep your back straight. That helps your mind to be more clear, focused in the here and now. And let your mind relax, settle down in the present. Put aside thoughts of the past, the future, other places, other things, so that you can just focus your full attention on what we're doing in this class, and that way get the most out of it. So let's do a short meditation on the 3 kinds of suffering that we were looking at last week. And remember that the reason for contemplating suffering, the kind of problems we experience in samsara, is so that we can develop renunciation, the determination to get ourselves out of this situation, which is very imperfect, very problematic, and to get ourselves to a state of freedom, liberation, enlightenment. And then we can help others get out as well. So the first of the 3 types of suffering is called the suffering of suffering. And that refers to experiences that are obviously painful, unpleasant, unwanted. And they can happen physically, like sickness, pain, injuries, disabilities, and also mentally or emotionally. So all the different kinds of painful, disturbing emotions that we have, like depression, anxiety, restlessness, boredom, irritation, grief, and so on. So there's a huge variety of different kinds of mental sufferings that we can have. So everyone who's in samsara will have this kind of suffering at least occasionally. We're never completely free from it. Think of some examples of this type of suffering that you have had. Then the second type of suffering is called the suffering of change. And this refers to pleasant experiences that are transitory and they don't really satisfy us. So they're like rainbows. They look attractive, but they quickly vanish and they're just not able to give us real lasting happiness, and they can't remove our suffering, our problems. So they're considered another kind of suffering or unsatisfactoriness. So this includes things like looking at beautiful objects, hearing pleasant sounds like music, tasting delicious foods, feeling good sensations in our body, enjoying nice smells, and so on. So at the moment they're happening, it seems like pleasure, happiness, but it's quickly gone. It disappears very quickly. So it's not really genuine, long-lasting happiness or pleasure. It's just another kind of unsatisfactoriness. And then the third type of suffering is called pervasive suffering. This refers to our very existence in samsara, having a body and mind that are caught up with karma and delusions. So we're not completely free of these factors, karma and delusions. And because of that, we don't have control. We can't really control things. We can't control our mind. We can't control our life, what happens to us. We can't control other people, the world, even though we would like to. We'd like to make everything go the way we want, but we are not able to, because it's karma and afflictions in our mind and in the minds of other sentient beings that are responsible for the things that happen to us. So this is like a state of non-freedom, a state of being trapped, imprisoned, in a very imperfect situation because of karma and afflictions that are in our mind and that we can't just shake out, get rid of, throw away. We're stuck with them. Because of them, then we experience problems, difficulties, and suffering again and again. So as long as we're in samsara, then we will experience these three types of sufferings again and again. So does that help you feel a sense of wanting to get out, wanting to be free of this situation? And there is a way out. The Buddha found the way out and taught it so that others could follow. And we're very fortunate that we have the chance to learn this way to be free of suffering once and for all, forever. Okay, so tonight, well, up to now, this is our third class, and up to now we've been mainly looking at the first of the four truths, which is the truth of suffering. So tonight we'll go on to the second truth, the causes of suffering. But before doing that, I just wanted to talk a bit more about how to avoid being depressed when we do experience suffering. When we think about suffering or hear about suffering. So Tyler, if you could put the outline on the screen. So I did talk about this already. Maybe it was the first class, and yeah, I said it's typical. It does happen that when we hear about all the different kinds of suffering and we're asked to meditate on them, to read about them, to think about them, and so on, that, yeah, our mind can become sort of depressed. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it does happen. And also with regard to all the problems in the world, when you read the news, it's a lot of news that isn't very uplifting, but is worrying and unpleasant and not what you want to hear. So whenever you do find your mind feeling depressed or feeling despair, hopeless about problems, then it's important to understand that it's not helpful. It's not helpful to get stuck in that state of mind. That isn't the point, and we should really do what we can to get ourselves out of that state of mind. Just like if, when people get a headache or they have some kind of pain in their body, they take medicine in order to deal with that. So we also need to apply medicine to our mind when our mind gets into some kind of negative or unskillful state. So here's just a few things we can do. Recall impermanence. I did mention that before. That means things are subject to change. They don't last forever. So whatever problems there are, whatever suffering there is, isn't permanent. It isn't going to last forever and ever and ever without ever changing or going away. So just to contemplate that can help us to feel a sense of lightness about suffering and problems and not take them too seriously. And then secondly is to simply accept that it's the reality of things. The Buddha spoke about the truth of suffering. First, that was the very first thing he talked about after he became enlightened. He said there is suffering, and he mentioned examples of that. And, people sometimes try to avoid that reality, deny it, pretend everything is okay when in fact it isn't. And that doesn't help. It doesn't help to pretend suffering isn't there when it is. So it's important to turn around that attitude of denial and just come to accept this is the reality. It's the nature of samsara, the situation that we are in. And if we can accept that, there is suffering and problems, then that will motivate us to do something about it, to get ourselves out of suffering and also help others to do the same. But if we're in denial and pretending it's not there, looking the other way and pretending it's not there, it's not going to go away. So it's much better to have a realistic attitude and then do what we can to remedy the problems. And then the third point here is reflect that suffering and problems aren't necessarily bad. And we tend to think suffering is bad, problems are bad. And of course, there are negative aspects of them. They cause a lot of suffering to people and so on. However, there's many cases of problems that people go through that are actually helpful for them. They can learn from them. So, for example, when people encounter difficulties, that sometimes sparks their interest in spiritual teachings and spiritual practice. Maybe before, they went through life just completely unconcerned with anything spiritual. And then when they face a problem, something goes wrong in their life, and it's like suddenly, wow, it kind of wakes them up, and then they can take an interest in a spiritual path and start practicing a spiritual path. So that can be very beneficial for them. Also, compassion. When we go through problems and difficulties, then we understand what that's like. And then when we hear about other people's problems and difficulties, we're in a better position to understand what they are going through and have compassion, empathy and compassion for them. So if we never had any problems ourselves, it would be difficult for us to empathize with and have compassion for other people's problems. So that's something else that we can learn from going through suffering and problems. So they're not necessarily bad. They can be beneficial. And then the fourth point says, be practical. And this means, if there is a problem, if there is a situation that we're unhappy about or worried about, then instead of just being unhappy, being worried, we should check to see if there's something we can do. Is there a solution? I think I mentioned this before because there's this wonderful quotation from Shantideva, the great Indian master, who said, "Why be unhappy about something if it can be remedied? And what's the use of being unhappy about something if it can't be remedied?" So that's very practical. It's just like saying, okay, is there something I can do to remedy this problem? And if there is, do it. Put your energy into doing it. But sometimes there isn't anything that can be done. And if that's the case, it doesn't help to be unhappy, to sit around feeling worried and unhappy and anxious and so on. Do something constructive. Yeah, do some prayers, do some recitations, do some meditation. So, yeah, that's what I mean by being practical. And then the last point here is cultivate equanimity. So the word equanimity can mean different things. Sometimes it means an attitude where we're not biased towards others, but we have equal concern and respect and care for others, for all beings. But another meaning of equanimity is it's a kind of state of mind that is steady and balanced rather than up and down. So no matter what kind of things happen to ourselves or to people around us, to the world and so on, we learn to keep our minds balanced, even, equanimous, rather than, up and down. And so one way we can cultivate this is by contemplating karma, and getting a good understanding of karma, and then learning to see things in terms of karma, that, okay, if there's a problem, somebody's going through some problem, some difficulty, then to think, well, they must have created the cause for that. We are all responsible for whatever experiences we have, happy or unhappy. They are the result of our own actions, our own karma that was created in the past. And so that doesn't mean being uncaring and saying, oh, well, that's just your bad karma, too bad. It doesn't mean that. Of course, we need to have compassion and try to help people when they are experiencing suffering and difficulties. We try to do what we can to relieve them. But sometimes, whatever we do, it just doesn't work. The suffering doesn't go away. The problem doesn't go away. They just keep experiencing it. And so then it's because karma is just too strong. The karma for that person to experience that problem is just too strong, and it can't be changed. But it is impermanent. So eventually that karma will be worked out and that problem will go away, not permanent. So if we understand that, the things that happen are the result of karma and various other causes and conditions. We do what we can to help and try to make things better. But if we've done everything we can and then the problem is still there, it's not our fault. We shouldn't blame ourselves, feel like, oh, I'm a failure and not good enough and so on. Even the Buddha, the Buddha during his life wasn't able to help everybody. There were some people that he met and they were just very negative towards the Buddha. They didn't want to listen to him. They didn't want to feel respect for him and so on. So even if we were the Buddha, we wouldn't be able to help everybody with their problems. So we just do what we can and then accept whatever the results will be. We may be successful, we may not. So thinking about that, understanding that can really help us to keep our mind more calm and balanced in the face of problems and difficulties. So those are just a few things that I have found helpful, because I have had this problem sometimes of feeling depressed, feeling overwhelmed, feeling worried, unhappy, anxious about problems. And I've realized that doesn't do any good. So it's better to put our mind into something that is helpful, that is constructive. And so these are some things that I found helpful. I hope they will be helpful to you as well. Okay, so now we'll go on to look at the second noble truth, which is the causes of suffering. And according to what the Buddha discovered in his experience when he investigated, why is there suffering? Nobody wants suffering, but why does it happen? So this is what he discovered. These two factors, two causes, karma and delusion. So I think you've already learned about karma. There was one of the earlier modules in the Discovering Buddhism program that was all about karma. So I won't talk so much about that now, but I'll be talking about delusions, the other main cause. And the word delusions in one of the readings I asked you to read was an article by Geshe Rapton, and he used the term klesha. That's the Sanskrit term, klesha. Tibetan term is nyunmong. So some people translate it as delusions. Others use afflictions or afflictive mental states, disturbing emotions. There's lots of different translations, but I'm using delusions because it's just kind of simple. So what is a delusion? A delusion it's an explanation here. A delusion is a mental factor. So it's an aspect of the mind, something in the mind, that when it arises in our mind, causes our mind to be unpeaceful and unsubdued. So it's a disturbing factor in the mind. there are times when we may not have any delusions coming up, or they're there but not very strong. But when they do, when a delusion does come up in the mind, then it shakes the mind. It makes the mind disturbed, unpeaceful, unsubdued. So that's the nature of a delusion, is to disturb the mind. And there are lots of delusions, but the three principal ones, which are also called three poisons, are attachment, anger, and ignorance. So we'll look at these now. Attachment, also called desire, and other terms that are used are craving, clinging, grasping. So those are all different terms for this same basic state of mind. So here's a description of attachment, so you know what it's all about. So again, it's a mental factor, aspect of our mind, and based on distorted attention that exaggerates the attractiveness of an object, attachment becomes interested in and wants to possess that object. So for example, we go to a store, a department store, shopping mall, whatever, and there's lots of things for sale. And if we see a particular object that attracts our attention, our mind kind of goes, focuses on that object, and to our mind, it's something interesting, something attractive. And then very quickly, there's this other thing that happens in our mind. Our mind kind of exaggerates the attractiveness of the object so that it seems to be more wonderful, more attractive, more desirable than it really is. So there's always an element of exaggeration or projection of an object. And then when that happens, it's like the object appears to be something that will make us happy, that will fulfill our desires. And so then attachment arises. We have attachment for that object. We feel, I want that object. I want to buy it. I want to take it home. I want to keep it with me because it will bring me happiness. So that's basically what attachment is about. And it can arise towards any of the objects of our six senses. So anything we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, feel with our body, and also with our mental consciousness. We can remember things from the past that we enjoyed and then have attachment, like wanting to go back and experience that again. So just in our mind, attachment can arise. And we can also get attached to people, material objects, consumer goods, and also more abstract things like views, like ways of thinking, political ideas or philosophical ideas or religious ideas and so on. And experiences, like some people love speeding, right? That feeling of speeding in a car, in a motorcycle, or jumping out of an airplane, falling to the ground. So that I don't know, I haven't done that, but it must be a pretty cool experience. So, that's something people can get attached to. So there's so many things that we can get attached to, countless things that we can get attached to. Okay, so that's attachment, also called desire. And then the second of the three poisons is anger. Anger can also be, again, there's different terms that can be used. Hatred is one, anger, hatred. And there's also different degrees of anger. Like it can be at a mild level, like irritation, just feeling irritated or feeling aversion or even just dislike, feeling of dislike, I think is kind of a low level form of anger. And then at the other end, there can be feelings of like strong aggressiveness, even wanting like violence, wanting to do something violent, to kill somebody, hit somebody, do something destructive. So there's a whole range of different feelings involved in this. But anyway, anger is explained as, again, a mental factor. And it's based on distorted attention that exaggerates or projects faults onto an object. And then it becomes antagonistic and wants to give harm. So it's kind of the opposite to attachment. Attachment, when there's attachment, our mind kind of exaggerates the object as being more wonderful, more fantastic, more attractive than it really is. And anger does the opposite. It sees the object as more unlikable, negative, having faults and so on, than it really is. So in both cases, there's exaggeration involved. We're not seeing the object in a realistic way, but we're seeing it in a distorted way, in an exaggerated way. And when anger is fully developed, full-blown anger, then it can be this wish to give harm, to harm the person or the object. It isn't always like that. You can just have a feeling of dislike or irritation or aversion, and you may not go that far wanting to harm the object. Although, there's different ways of giving harm. One way of giving harm might be to simply close off and not be nice to that person. Like when you're angry at somebody and you kind of decide, I'm not going to smile at you or speak to you in a friendly way or look at you in a friendly way. I'm just not going to give you any friendliness, any warmth at all. So in a way, that's kind of harm. Yeah, that's cutting the person off, closing the person off from your warmth and your love and your kindness. So that's a kind of harm. So that's something we might do when we're angry at somebody. But then, of course, there's also lots of cases where people do more than that and will actually do something physically harm the person they're angry at, or verbally, like speaking harsh words, hurtful words, hateful words. So there's different ways of giving harm. So again, anger can arise towards people or other sentient beings, animals, insects, and so on. And also it can arise towards inanimate objects, like your phone, your car, your computer. When it isn't working properly, you can get angry at it. I heard about this guy, some guy in Colorado who got angry at his computer, and he took it out in the backyard and shot it with his gun. So probably didn't help, but anyway, that just shows what anger can do. It can sort of make us irrational. And ideas as well. I think we can also get angry towards certain views, like political views, or other kinds of views that people may hold. So again, lots of different things we can have anger towards. But I think in most cases, most of the time, our anger is directed towards other people. Then the third of the three poisonous attitudes is ignorance. And this is kind of complex because there's actually different kinds of ignorance. The word ignorance can refer to different mental states, but a general definition of ignorance is this here. It's a deluded state of unknowing brought about by the mind's lack of clarity regarding the nature of things, like the law of cause and effect, or karma, the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the Four Noble Truths, and so on. So it's just a lack of understanding, correct understanding about objects like this. These are aspects of Buddha's teachings, although they're not just, philosophical ideas, but they're like karma, the law of karma, the law of cause and effect. This is something that exists. It's happening. It happens. Somebody does a negative action and they will experience suffering later on. Somebody does a virtuous action, they will experience happiness later. It's not a philosophical idea, but it's just the reality, how things happen. But a lot of people are unaware of that, unaware of karma. And so it says here there's many kinds of ignorance, but the two main ones are ignorance of karma, the law of cause and effect. This ignorance leads to unfortunate rebirths. So this is very unfortunate when people are ignorant about karma and they do things like going hunting and fishing and so on. And they probably think, oh, this is great. I really enjoy doing this. It brings me a lot of happiness and a lot of pleasure, and I can bring home some food to feed my family. And so they don't see there's anything wrong, anything negative. It's legal as well in many places, so they're not breaking the law. So they think, what they're doing is completely fine. But according to the law of karma, they're actually creating negative karma, which, if it isn't purified, will be the cause of suffering later on, like being reborn in an unfortunate state of existence. So ignorance of karma is really tragic. People are looking for happiness, trying to be happy, but because of not understanding karma, the law of cause and effect, they may be doing things that are actually taking them in the direction of suffering rather than happiness. And then because they don't understand how to create virtue, good karma, the cause of happiness, they may avoid doing that. And so they're not creating the cause for happiness in the future. So it's very sad, very tragic that people have this kind of ignorance. And then the second main kind of ignorance is ignorance that doesn't know the true nature of things, ignorance of the true, reality, how things really exist. And according to the highest school in Buddhism, the Prasangika school, that means emptiness. Emptiness of inherent existence is the actual way that everything exists, the true mode of being of all things. But instead of seeing things in that way, we see things in the opposite way. We see things as if they are inherently existing, independently existing, real from their own side. And that's completely incorrect, completely wrong. And so we got it completely wrong, how things exist, like our own self and I and others and all the phenomena in the world and so on. So we're not seeing things correctly as they are. And this type of ignorance is the result of this is it keeps us trapped in samsara. So even if we understand karma and we live according to karma, we avoid negative karma and we create good karma, that will bring us happiness in samsara, but it won't help us get out of samsara. We'll still remain in samsara. So to become free of samsara, the whole cycle of death and rebirth and suffering, we have to overcome this second type of ignorance about the true nature of things. And the second kind of ignorance is also the basis of all the other delusions. So because we're not seeing things correctly, we're not seeing our own I, our own self, or I, we don't see ourselves correctly, we don't see others correctly, we don't see things in the world correctly, then that is why and how we get caught up in other afflictions like attachment, desire, craving for whatever we think is going to make us happy, and then anger, hatred, aversion towards whatever we don't like and think is the cause of suffering, and all the other afflictions as well. They're all like rooted in ignorance about the true nature of things. So that's the main thing we need to overcome to be free of suffering, to be free of samsara and attain nirvana, enlightenment. So those are the three main afflictions. There are lots of others. And if you read, one of the readings for this week's class was in the Wish-Fulfilling Golden Sun. And there it mentioned actually 6 root delusions. So there's 3 other root delusions on top of the 3 here. And the other 3 are arrogance or pride, where we feel superior to others. And then deluded doubt, where we have like really strong doubt about things like karma, possibility of enlightenment, such that they sort of cause us to be immobilized. Doubt can make us sort of paralyzed or immobilized. We can't go forward because we're so doubtful about, the truth of the path and so on. And then the third one is wrong views, and there's a variety of different wrong views mentioned there. So there's 6 root delusions, and then there's also another list of 20 secondary delusions. And I noticed that in the Wish-Fulfilling Golden Sun, it gives the Tibetan terms for those, but doesn't always give the English terms. And so I'm going to ask Tyler to send you a handout after tonight's class with this 20 secondary delusions and more clear explanations and terms for them. But don't feel obliged to learn all of these because there's a lot of material in this course, and I think for some of you it might be overwhelming. You'll have a chance later to learn more details about mental factors, delusions, and so forth. So I'm just sending it to you just if you're interested. Some of you might be interested. You might like to know what those 20 secondary delusions are. But if you feel this is enough, you have enough as it is, then that's fine too. It's like with eating, people have different appetites. Some people eat a lot and they don't even gain weight. But other people, they just eat little bits. And so it's similar with information. Yeah, we have different degrees of interest in learning things. So those who want to learn the 20 secondary delusions, you'll have a chance to do that. But if you find it too much, then that's okay too. I see a hand up. Ladan, is your question related to what we're talking about here?
Yes, Venerable, I have a question which is come all the time when I'm like reading about karma, or I see it in my life. What if we don't create the good karma to understand very well, like the law of karma? Like it's kind of coming back to me, this question. I know that we need to cultivate like to the right view and all of stuff. But what about like other people which are in a very bad like situation and they are killing or they are being killed or they see their loved one being killed on before their eyes. I don't get it. But what if, like if we have the good karma to understand it, so it's easy for us to understand and cultivate the good way of being. But what if all this, like it, I know that karma is not fate, it's not destiny, but sometimes I come back in this loop that it is kind of fate because you don't have choice sometimes in your life.
I'm not completely sure what you're asking. Maybe you could give an example of what you're talking about.
Uh, Yes, of course. Uh, like I know that karma is not fate.
Mm,
Karma is not fate. Karma is not a destiny.
mhm.
But sometimes when I see like we are drained to some kind of a spirituality, good view of being like uh, compassionate to others, even if we don't even know about Buddhism or even if we don't have any religion. We are atheist and we have that. But some people are drive to the like they are born into the bad area and they have no education. You know what I mean. So uh, the this is very difficult for me to understand that I know that karma is not fate, is not destiny, but the example of people in the society, sometimes they have no choice to turn bad.
Mm.
That's why I know that it's not destiny, but sometimes I say, oh, I cultivate the karma to understand this. I'm lucky, or I don't know. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, the kind of situation that people are born into, like the family and the place and the society, and then the experiences they have as they go through life. So these are all results of karma created in the past. And so, like you say, there's some people who are born in a really bad situation. Maybe they're, family of drug addicts in a really rough neighborhood, and there's lots of violence and gangs and so on. So it would seem like they don't have much chance to get out of that situation. But this is the result of karma they created in the past to be born in that kind of situation. And then those of us who were had the opportunity to be born in a situation where we had, more healthy and wholesome uh, surroundings, family and environment and teachings, education, and so forth, then this is also the result of karma. And you do find sometimes there are cases of people who are born in really difficult circumstances, and yet they can still turn out completely wonderful, like because they have that good karma to be compassionate. They're drawn to compassion, they're drawn to wisdom. So they find their way out of that difficult situation in spite of what seems to be kind of a hopeless situation. So karma is, I mean, it's such a complex thing. Yeah, karma is incredibly complex. And they even say that to really understand all the aspects of karma, you really need a Buddha's mind to be able to say, okay, this person in this situation, they created such and such karma and such life and so on and so forth. So all we just learn the general aspects of karma, the general principles of karma, and then we try to apply that to our own life. And the most important thing with regard to karma is that we try to live our life in accordance with karma, try to create virtue as much as we can and avoid non-virtue as much as we can. But when it comes to looking around the world and trying to understand, well, why is that person experiencing that? And why is that person experiencing that? I mean, that's kind of going beyond our ability to understand. And so it isn't fate in the sense that it can always be changed. Any negative karma that is created can be purified. So we can always change karma. It isn't something carved in stone. But yeah, I mean, the important thing is just try to understand it in a general sense and then apply it in our lives and try to live our life in accordance with that. And you know, even though other religions don't necessarily have the term karma, but I think all major religions have the similar idea. You know, certain actions are virtuous. You do those actions, you will have a good situation in the future. And these actions are negative, they're bad, they're sinful. Avoid those. So you do find similar teachings in all religions, even if they don't use the word karma. So I think it's kind of universal. It's a universal thing. And even people who haven't studied, who haven't learned, like you say, sometimes they'll just have a natural kind of instinctive sense of wanting to be helpful to others, wanting to relieve suffering, wanting to be generous, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So that's probably because of karma they created in the past.
Thank
I hope that helps.
you.
So
Yes,
I
yes,
wanted
very
to,
much. Thank you.
yeah, I wanted to leave some time at the end for questions. So let's carry on a little bit more, see how much we can get. Okay, so the next point is then how delusions lead to karma. So it's both karma and delusions that are the cause of our suffering in samsara. So delusions are these mental states, mental factors, and they arise in our mind towards people, experiences, and so on. And if we don't know how to control our mind or not able to control our mind, then a delusion can come up and then sort of take over our mind. Our mind just gets kind of possessed by a delusion. And then we will find ourselves acting it out. Okay. And if we act motivated by a delusion, we do an action with our body, with our speech, or with our mind, then we are creating non-virtuous karma, negative karma, like killing, stealing, and so forth. And it's always possible to purify negative karma that's created, but a lot of people don't know how to do that, or even if they do know, they don't do it. And so if that karma doesn't get purified, then it will lead to misery, to suffering, such as taking rebirth in unfortunate realms as an animal or hungry ghost or in hell. And it can also be the cause of suffering and problems even when we're born in a fortunate realm, like when we're born as a human being. So that's considered a fortunate life, but within that life, when we experience sickness or poverty or mental problems, relationship problems, any kind of problem experienced even in a fortunate realm, this is the result of karma that was created under the influence of delusion. So that's just a simple explanation of how karma is created under the influence of delusion. And then when we look at the 10 non-virtuous actions, which you've probably learned before, so any of those could be done motivated by any of the 3 poisons that we just looked at. So those 3 poisons of attachment, anger, and ignorance could be the motivating factor for any of the 10 non-virtuous actions. So here I'm giving the example of killing, taking the life of another being. So this can happen due to anger. Probably most cases of killing are due to anger. People get angry at someone they consider an enemy and they kill them. Or people sometimes kill a sentient being like a mosquito, a fly that they find annoying and they just want to get it out of existence. So that's anger, motivating killing. But killing can also be done out of attachment. So, for example, killing an animal for its meat or skin. Another example would be in order to steal. Yeah, if somebody's attached to somebody else's property and they kill the person in order to steal their property. So that's also killing out of attachment. And then it can also happen out of ignorance. So out of ignorance, if we go to the next page, so one example, this happened in India. It still happens in India and some other countries. Certain religious groups have the practice of animal sacrifice. So they they kill animals like goats, sheep, and so on, and offer the blood to some god, some worldly god, and they think that's a virtuous action. So that would be an example of killing out of ignorance. And then yeah, I think in Christianity, some people have this idea that, I mean, it actually says something in the Bible about this, that God created animals for human beings to use. And so then they think there's nothing wrong with killing animals for food. So that's why we have this whole business of raising animals and killing animals. Billions of animals are killed for food, for human consumption. And they don't see anything wrong with this because, well, not everybody believes in the Bible, but those who do, they say, but God said we can, they're there for us to use, so it's completely fine. I don't see anything wrong with that. So that would be an example of killing out of ignorance that doesn't understand karma, what kind of karma is being created. And also not understanding that animals are beings like us with minds, feelings. They don't want to die. They suffer when they're killed. And if we cause them suffering, then we are creating negative karma. So there's just some examples of how any of those three poisons can lead to creating negative karma, which then becomes the cause of suffering. Then it says, of these two causes of suffering, delusions and karma, delusions are considered primary. Those are the main cause of suffering. And the reason is because if we eliminated all delusions but still had karma, yeah, and this does actually happen. This is the case with arhats, those who have attained nirvana, and also bodhisattvas at high levels. So they've completely eliminated all the delusions in their mind, but they haven't eliminated all karma. They still have some karma, but that karma will not lead to suffering. Without delusions to kind of, nourish the karma and cause the karma to bring suffering, then they won't experience any suffering. But on the other hand, if we had delusions but no karma, right? Somehow we didn't have any karma, we had delusions. The delusions would quickly lead us to create new karma and then lead to suffering. So they say delusions, I don't know if those reasons make sense to you or not, but anyway, they say delusions are the main problem, the main cause of suffering, because they are what lead us to create karma, which in turn is the cause for suffering. So that's the main thing. Our main work, our main job is to overcome delusions. Although we do have to be careful about karma, of course. We try to refrain from negative karma and create virtuous karma as much as we can. But what we really need to do is overcome delusions. So the next section is a list of disadvantages of delusions, because sorry, we didn't finish that. Yeah, the disadvantages of delusion. So some people have no trouble accepting that delusions are harmful, but some people do. I mean, some people may even feel they feel good when they're angry. Yeah, I've heard that people say that when they're angry, they have a lot of energy, they can get a lot done, so they don't really see the point of overcoming anger. And also attachment. Some people think that, well, we need attachment, we need desire to get the things that we want. Life would be boring and empty and meaningless if we didn't have desire and attachment. So not everyone recognizes that delusions are harmful and things to overcome. And so it's good to look at the disadvantages of delusions. So I'll just go through these. This is probably as much as we'll be able to cover tonight. And then, you can ask questions about them. You can also contemplate them before next week. Okay, so one disadvantage is that when they arise in our mind, they make our mind disturbed and unpeaceful. So this is like an immediate effect. Yeah, the immediate effect of a delusion is making our mind unpeaceful, disturbed. So this is something we can look out for and check for ourselves. And secondly, they see things in distorted, unrealistic ways. So when we're angry at somebody, we're not seeing that person in a realistic way. We're seeing them as 100% bad, and nobody's 100% bad. And so it causes us to sort of only focus on negative things about the person and ignore good things about the person. And Buddha doesn't see that person that way. Buddha sees a lot of good things in that person and loves them. So we're not seeing things correctly when we're caught up in a delusion. And then the third is they can lead to other problems in this life. Yeah, we can have problems at work, especially with anger. We get angry at work, and we don't get along with our colleagues, with our boss, and so on. Might even get fired. In our relationships, yeah, most relationship problems happen because of attachment and anger and jealousy, these disturbing emotions coming up. And also health. Okay, so delusions can also affect our physical health, our mental health. I've heard there's research that shows that anger is actually bad for us. It harms our health, shortens our life. So just here in this life, we can experience problems with delusions. Then next it says, they leave seeds in our mind that cause the same delusion to arise again and again. So each time we get angry or have attachment, then it's like the seed is left that will give rise to that same delusion again in the future. So it's kind of like what they talk about in neuroscience, neural pathways, making a habit of a certain state of mind, and then it just gets easier and easier all the time to fall into that same state of mind. The next one, they motivate actions that are negative. sometimes illegal. So you may end up in jail. Yeah, you end up with a prison sentence. But even if that doesn't happen, there will be consequences in the future unless you purify that karma. And then they are the source of many tragic events in the world, like wars, conflicts, terrorism, violence, injustice, abuse, corruption, and so on and so on. So the problems in the world that we read about in the news every day, if we trace back, where do those problems come from? Why are they happening? Why does war happen? Well, it's because of delusions in the minds of people who start the wars. Yeah, ignorance, and then greed, and arrogance, and jealousy. So a whole complex of delusions in their minds, leading them to start wars and then continue wars and so on. So those are disadvantages that we can see kind of here and now, we can see for ourselves. But in the Buddhist texts, they mention other faults that aren't so obvious. They keep us trapped in samsara, forced to die and be reborn repeatedly without choice and undergo myriad types of suffering. So delusions are the things that keep us stuck in samsara, unable to get free, unable to attain nirvana, enlightenment, experience all the problems in samsara. And then next, they hinder the development of positive qualities like compassion and wisdom. Right? So if we aspire to have more compassion, more wisdom, and other qualities, concentration, so delusions are a hindrance to those. And they can also cause good qualities that we already have to degenerate. Right? So we may have some compassion, but if we don't learn how to manage our anger, then we won't be able to increase our compassion, and we'll have maybe even degeneration of compassion. Finally, they are obstacles to attaining the realizations of the path and the supremely blissful states of liberation and enlightenment. So if we hear about those states, liberation, enlightenment, and we wish to attain them, then delusions are obstacles that need to be overcome. So next week, I'll stop here and leave time for questions. Next week, I'll talk about some antidotes that we can use for delusions. The ultimate antidote is the wisdom of emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness, but that's difficult to develop. So in the meantime, there are other things we can do when delusions arise in our mind to manage them so they don't take over, and we can even transform our mind into things that are more positive, more constructive. And I'll also look at this next point. We won't do that tonight, the 6 factors causing delusions to arise, but those are really interesting. And I'll be sending you a handout to read. Lama Yeshe gave a talk on these, and it was published in Wisdom, a book called Wisdom Energy, but I downloaded it from Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archives, and so I'll ask Tyler, I'll send it to Tyler to send to you. So I've actually got 3 handouts for next week. One is that, Lama Yeshe's talk on these 6 factors causing delusions to arise, then the list of the 20 secondary afflictions for those who are interested, and then another one is about remedies for attachment and anger. So you can read those ahead of time, and then we'll go through them next week. So I'll stop there for tonight and leave you time for questions. Anyone has a question? Okay, Stan.
Yes, thank you. I feel that I have a great attachment for my Dharma practice. And how does that factor into our discussion tonight? I mean, am
How,
I hope I'm not deluded by my Dharma practice, because I like to think it's the positive thing to motivate my life, and I
yeah.
have great faith in it. It's all faith based, of course. But it just occurred to me, I thought about what's my greatest attachment, and one of them is my Dharma practice. And it's what I think about mostly throughout the day, and motivates me in most things. So, anything to say about that?
Yeah. Um, so one thing is the full definition of attachment. I didn't give it here. I just made it kind of a simplified definition. But the full definition of attachment says it it's something that arises towards a contaminated object.
Ah,
Contaminated means involved with ignorance and delusions.
understood. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so they say if we have attachment, or if we have, it's maybe attachment, it isn't the right word, but if we have kind of strong interest in, or, affinity with, or attraction to the Dharma, or the Dalai Lama, spiritual teachers, the Buddha, and so on, that wouldn't really be considered attachment. Attachment is more that's what arises towards coffee and chocolate and sex and drugs and money and things like that,
Yeah, that makes a lot of
contaminated
sense.
things. But yeah, if we have this strong interest in Dharma, learning and practicing Dharma. I mean, it could, we do have to be careful about that. We have to take care of our health. We also have to take care of our responsibilities. It's like a mother, yeah, who's got little kids, and she's kind of neglecting her kids because she's spending all her time going to the Dharma center and practicing Dharma, and her kids aren't getting taken care of. So that's not healthy. So we have to be careful that our interest in the Dharma and studying and practicing the Dharma isn't, imbalanced. And we do need to take care of our responsibilities, people, and so on and so forth, and our health.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for that response.
Asha?
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you for the teachings today. Very clear. Just to jump on Stan's, I have two other questions, but the same thing I experienced that Stan talked about. And I do have responsibilities, family, and work. But this attachment towards Dharma, while it is a good attachment or a desire to have, it does cause suffering when you are not able to devote that much time towards the studying, right? It causes frustration, um, impatience, sadness,
Mm,
How do we work with that? And I do have two other questions, I'm sorry. But
okay. Yeah, so that's a good point that if we have this strong longing, I'll use the word longing, longing to have more time to learn and practice the Dharma, but we're not able to because we have, these other responsibilities. Um, well, that's a good question. I mean, I guess some people would think, well, I'll take care of my responsibilities, like raise my kids and keep working as long as I need to. But in the future, there will be a time in the future when I will have more time, and I will devote myself to Dharma then. So do as much as you can now. Yeah, just in a reasonable way. Spend as much time as you can, do as much as you can now, and really cherish the Dharma. Have that attitude of regarding the Dharma as incredibly precious. And then, just say to yourself, in the future, when the kids are grown up and I retire, then I will practice more Dharma. So maybe you could console yourself in that way. So, and yeah, you're right that attachment, if it is attachment, then it can lead to problems like that. Yeah.
yeah,
So
Yeah, yeah, and that's why that's what I try to tell myself. Thank you so much. So another question I had was maybe I'll just ask one question, and if nobody else has, then I can ask my second question.
yeah.
So, is there a fine line when a pleasurable experience is um, safely pleasurable before it gets contaminated as an attachment, as a delusion? So, for example, if I'm meeting friends, I enjoy meeting friends, right? But is there like a fine line up to this particular time? It's safe to have that pleasurable experience. It's not delusion. But if you get attached, you grasp at it and you want to have it more and more again, then it's a contaminated, then it's a delusion.
Mhm.
Is such a separation in such experiences or desires?
Um, so if I'm, what I understand you're asking is when you're enjoying, there's some situation like being with friends and you're enjoying that, where does it slip over into attachment? Is that what you're asking?
Well, before that, is there such a separation? Is there an experience, a desirable experience that is safe, desirable experience, not a delusion? And then a second aspect is turns into delusion.
I mean, what I often hear the lamas say, and also reading in books, they say that there's nothing wrong with pleasure. There's nothing wrong with being happy and
Mhm.
having pleasurable experiences. The problem is attachment. Although it's very difficult, very
Right.
difficult to have a pleasurable experience without attachment because our mind is just so habituated to attachment. So it's a question of just watching your mind, watching what's going on in your mind, and trying to recognize when attachment is arising. Like you say, I want this to last, I want this to happen again.
Mm.
You know, that grasping mind, that's attachment. But simply enjoying your being with friends or enjoying drinking a cup of tea or eating something or listening to birds singing, just having that pleasure, that experience of pleasure isn't itself attachment. It's only when the mind grasps at it. But there are some things that you can do if you do want to avoid attachment. One is, I mean, it's actually a practice of offering whatever pleasant experience you have. You think, I offer this to the Buddhas, make an offering of it to the Buddhas. And you can
Mm.
also think, I wish all living beings could enjoy this as well. Because
Mm.
attachment is usually can be kind of very self-centered, egotistic.
Yes.
My pleasure. I want to have this a pleasure again and again for me. And so if you kind of think, this is a beautiful experience, I wish all sentient beings could experience this as well. So in that way, that is going against the tendency to grasp at the experience just with sort of self-centered attachment. So there's things like that you can do that can help you make avoid attachment. Also remembering impermanence. Yeah, just getting
Mhm.
familiar with impermanence. Good times don't last. They always come to an end, and that awareness can help you to avoid grasping
Yeah,
attachment.
that makes sense. Thank you so much for those pointers.
So there's a few more minutes. I don't see any other hands, so Asha, you can ask your other question.
Okay, thank you, Venerable. So the one point you had was the understanding of emptiness enables us to be free from samsara. I don't know if I followed that correctly. How does understanding emptiness allows us to be free from samsara?
Well, it's not like that. It doesn't happen, but it's a gradual thing. It's because the understanding of emptiness, not just understanding it intellectually, but it's a realization, an actual direct realization of emptiness that we need. So that is directly opposite to ignorance, ignorance that doesn't understand emptiness. And ignorance is said to be the root of samsara. And so if we can generate this wisdom directly realizing emptiness, that's like the antidote, the medicine that will eliminate the ignorance. And with the elimination of ignorance, then and other afflictions, then once those afflictions are gone in the mind, then we are free of samsara. So it's a process. It isn't something instantaneous, but once we have the direct realization of emptiness, we have the medicine, we have the cure, we have the means that will enable us to overcome the causes of suffering, the causes of samsara, which are these delusions like ignorance, attachment, anger, and so on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So understanding emptiness, it removes the delusions. So if no delusions, then no negative actions, no negative karma, no results of the negative karma, no sufferings. You pure and exit the samsara.
Right, right.
I
Yeah. So we'll get into that a little bit more. We got 2 more classes to go before this class ends. So we'll get into that a little bit. But also in Discovering Buddhism, there's another module. I think it might be number 12 or 13, just about emptiness. So you'll learn more about emptiness in that module.
thank you.
Okay, so here's the homework. A little bit of meditation to do each day on these 3 main delusions, and then readings. So there's just one more reading in the Discovering Buddhism required reading, the article on anger by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And then there are these 3 handouts that I will send to Tyler to send to you. So if you could read those as well. And then questions to contemplate about delusions. Yeah, just what you think about the need to overcome delusions, to be free of suffering. And do you think there's any advantages or benefits to having delusions? So we went through a list of disadvantages, bad things about delusions. So do you see anything helpful about having delusions? So it's just for you to think about, contemplate. And also just to mention on the list of readings for Discovering Buddhism, it mentioned this book, The Meaning of Life by the Dalai Lama. And I just want to say that if you wish to read that book, that's fine, but I don't make that a requirement. I think we've got enough material as it is, and I will give you later, I'll give you a handout about the 12 links of dependent origination, and we'll go through that the last class. So the handouts that I'm giving you can replace that book. But if you want to read the book, that's fine. It's a very nice book. Explains more about the 12 links of dependent origination. Okay, so we'll stop there for tonight, and let's dedicate the merit, the positive energy of our time together, good energy we created, to enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So if we could have the prayers. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha. and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Patient in bearing the hardships of spreading the teachings of the Muni in general and the teachings of the victorious Jamgun in hundreds of directions, Lord of Dharma, holding the 3 vows and wearing saffron robes, please return quickly as the glory of the peerless teachings. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tyler, for hosting.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Venerable
Tyler.
Khadro. Thank you,
Thank you,
Tyler. See
Venerable.
everybody
You're
next
welcome,
week.
everybody.
See
You're
you.
welcome, Venerable. Thank you all so much.
The next
Bye-bye.
Precious teachings.